Hello, you're listening to Recalibrate and Go, a podcast brought to you by Aptude. I'm your host, Michael Foster. Hello, you're listening to our first ever podcast. I'm Michael Foster. I just introduced myself because we are really doing this lo-fi, doing this from home. It's April of 2020, so if you remember your history and you're listening to this sometime far into the future, you know, we're all practicing social distancing. But we decided this would be a good time to start this podcast, something that Vice President Guy D. Rose and I have been talking about for a long time, and well, here it is. We're going to be bringing you information about technology. I mean, let's face it, Aptude is an IT consulting firm. So we're going to talk about technology from all different angles, all different perspectives. You may not agree with everything. You may agree with all of it. None of it. I don't know, but we're going to talk about it. And here today for our first podcast, we decided to cover a topic that's basically on everyone's mind because everyone's having to do it. We're all working from home. And that process, well, some people it's pretty easy, some people not so much. So we brought in Heather Noggle. She is the CEO of Exits Inc. She does Global Wizard. She's a 20-year veteran, knows more about technology than anybody. And we're really excited to have her as our first guest. Today, we're going to be talking about some of the more practical aspects of transitioning from the office to home, things you got to keep in mind. And if anything, we thought, well, it just might be good to hear what other people are going through in the industry because we're all in this together, even though we're all apart. And if you're listening to this in the far future, we recorded this in April of 2020, and maybe we can all look back on this and see what we got right, what we got wrong, what was important, what wasn't important. Hopefully this can make for a nice historical document. Well, regardless, here we are, episode 1, Recalibrate and Go, brought to you by Aptude. Let's talk to Heather Noggle now. And with us today, I have Heather Noggle. Hey, Heather, how you doing?
Doing great.
Welcome.
Thanks, Michael.
Welcome. Thank you so much for being one of our first guests. And I hope you don't mind the bumpiness, a little bit of turbulence. We're getting our sea legs.
Everything is turbulent. Yes.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. Sea legs, turbulence. Those are two completely different concepts. Once again, we're new at this, so we're going to figure it out eventually. We'll get our jargon correct. And so, obviously, now the thing with you, Heather, is that you've had a nice career and a very stable career. A lot of technicians tend to be, kind of like lone gunmen. They sort of jump from contract position to contract position. But you're basically a pioneer in a sense. And so the first thing I got to ask, though, is your nickname is Data Head. How did you get that nickname?
Strangely, that was from an HR job. And there's a whole lot of data in human resources. And so when I wasn't interviewing and doing things like that, I was playing with data for my boss back in the 90s, when before IT was spread to serve everybody. You had to get what you could from whatever you could. And so my boss would task me with these data analysis things, and they called me Data Head.
And you start, I mean, it's funny because I always think Data Head, and then I thought Radiohead, and I thought, would that be appropriate? But you did start in the year 2000. You started the same year I did, actually.
Yeah, this HR stuff was in the 90s, and I made the shift right before the .com bubble burst into full-time tech, yeah.
Because you mentioned that you had this software engineering position for 3 months, and that became like a 20-year career.
Yes.
So did the .com bubble actually help accelerate that? Was that why they needed you around? Or
I think that's how I got in, because, I have a degree in communications. So I'm a speaker, I'm a writer, I'm those things. And the tech was just always a passion from childhood. And I never thought I'd be in full-time tech or have the opportunity with a light resume in that area. And so some of the HR work did bolster that, supplementary to the normal HR things. But the full-time tech thing, I think I got that job because I was a woman and I spoke very honestly about what I knew and what I didn't know. And it was the consultancy was going to keep me on, but the first gig was supposed to be just 3 months. And it extended into 6. And then from there, it started to take traction and it just continued to extend until I tried to be a stay-at-home mom in 2006 when I had my first child, and the company hired me directly from the consultancy at that point. Just really agreed to work with me however I was able to work. So, right after the hiring in 2001 or so, that bubble did burst, but I was already in. So yeah, I think that worked out really well for me.
And I mean, that's outstanding. I mean, I know for myself, I mean, you're a media communications major, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
So was I. And it's funny because I think in the 90s, media communications almost felt like one step above liberal arts. It was like the degree they just gave you if you didn't know what you wanted to do. But
yes.
but now that seems to be such a critical field. It's amazing how things can change in 20 years. It seems like that's media communications. I mean, that's it in many ways now. I mean,
you've got to be able to speak. You've got to be able to write to really move into any field and have anybody take you seriously.
Yeah, it's funny how times have changed, and getting back to that, because obviously, you've had kids, you have 2 boys, and
I have 2 boys,
and you work from home now, technically speaking, or do you work from a home office? I'm trying to remember exactly how it is.
Okay, the story goes, it is a home office within my home, so I'm perfectly poised for today's times. In 2009, we moved from the St. Louis area to our current town, which is about 3 hours away. And in knowing we were moving, my husband's also worked from home, we specifically looked for a home that had 2 offices that were far, far away from anything that might be happening upstairs with our children, who were then 1 and 3. So the idea was to try to work where one parent would be with the kids, or we would hire in some help, and then the other parent would be able to work as though it were an actual office. So we really poised ourselves in that way. And so, today, fast forward to 2020, and we have 2 children on laptops doing their schooling, and then we have 2 parents doing their work. And so we have 4 Zoom meetings going on at a time. It's kind of funny.
So it really is a fully functional home office.
It is, yes. Printers and everything. I have a gentleman I'm working with right now who wants to sign an NDA for us, and he doesn't have a printer where he is sequestered at home. So it's kind of funny.
Oh my gosh. I mean, my wife and I, we ran a home business from 2004 to about 2010. During that time, we actually moved from Chicago to Seattle and back again. Yeah, I remember we were still using fax machines in those days.
Yes.
Some people are like, I don't know what that means. That's just, I don't know what a fax machine. I mean, the kids got to know, right? Or do they not know? Is it like cassette tapes? Are these kids coming out of college? They don't know what a fax machine is.
It's really pretty irrelevant now. Some of the things you see in my field, you actually have telex. So I remember laughing in 2000 at telex the way we're laughing at fax now. So it's okay. Yeah.
So getting into, and we're just kind of slowly meandering our way into the topic of today, but it is there. I think a lot of it just say, yeah, we've been in this business for a while, so we've worked all kinds of situations. But obviously, as you know, with the coronavirus, COVID-19, so many of us are working from home. And the first thing I'll just say is that I'm so thankful that we work in an industry that allows us to make that transition relatively easy. It's all of our friends and family that work hospitality or whatnot, the restaurant business. It's a really, really tough time.
Yes.
So getting it, but I think it's interesting because I've had the ability to work from home, and obviously you've been able to do this. I know a lot of companies, and you try to group businesses. I mean, there's so many, they come in so many different sizes and flavors, and it's not, there's never going to be one fix. Some of the things we talked about in terms of the basics, you're working with people and they're all located in different areas. So how do you close the distance? How have you found what works best to closing the distance between all of us who are now working, VIA, home office, video conferencing and all that?
Strangely, from a team perspective, so my internal team, we rarely video conference. It's a bandwidth issue, and it's just, there's the trust already built there that we don't need the video. And I think that some of the advice that I'm seeing with new people working from home is keep that contact with your team, but then the level you need to bring to be in a video conference is the same level you have to bring to be in a room with people working together. And I think there's a whole lot more honesty available when you're just a voice and you can sit with your legs crossed and just relaxed in a relaxed body position that will transfer into your voice. And so that's some of the strange advice I give that seems contrary to certain other people when they say, let's do all these video calls is, yes, do some video calls to keep connected, but you'll have a whole lot better response if between when you're talking, you can do something like squats, push-ups, or even crochet. Take good notes, not have to be looking at the camera. You can get a lot done in a shorter period of time if you don't have the camera aspect. So that's my first piece of advice.
That's really interesting, actually, because everyone tells you the opposite. But
they do.
But the caveat, obviously, being is that if you have a team that you've worked together for a while and you know each other, this is you don't need to spend that critical bandwidth, because that is a problem now. It really
yes.
truly is.
And on the other side, I've always done sales remotely. At least the early work, building the relationship, has been voice and email. So that the writing becomes so important, so that when you follow up from that voice phone call, you've got a beautiful email you can craft, construct, and send quickly. So I think that that's important. Where we're going to get into some interesting ground for us is usually when we land a customer of a certain size, we often will visit on site and do the intensive work, where we're going to have to do, obviously, any intensive work that's going to arrive in the next month or two will be done via Zoom, via Skype, via video call. And so that's going to be a little bit of a shift for us. We've done it both ways. I do prefer the in-person because it really solidifies that working relationship for years to come. So it's just a shift in the mindset of, we can look at, we're all in this together. And so we automatically have something much more important than the weather that we can talk about immediately. There's always something there that binds us together during this period of time of everybody facing at least the surrealness of it. And then to varying degree of personal challenges regarding our current, I hate to use the word crisis, but it is a crisis now anyway.
It's multiple crises, actually.
Yeah.
Crises. Once again, I'm an artist, not a talker. So my English language is going to be interesting to some, but we'll figure that out later. but yeah, no, there's definitely there's a lot happening at once. Time for a break. These are crazy times, man. And, we recognize all of your overall strategies might be taking a back seat to the immediate priorities of the moment. But as we get through this, Aptude will be ready with options to get those projects back on track, contain costs while providing quality deliverables so that you can get more done. We're here to help. Whether or not you need services right now or just want to have a friendly, free-flowing, brainstorming chat about your current situation, don't hesitate to reach out. We're Aptude, keeping you one step ahead of the curve. They talked about how a lot of us are actually experiencing that morning, that we're all sort of like downshifting a little bit and adjusting to new normals. Now obviously, because you and I come from we're Gen X, and so obviously we come from the previous generation, working models, and being in person is a big deal. I mean, do you feel? And obviously it's impossible to tell right now, but the idea of the video conference, the value of not being in person, do you think by the time all the dust has settled from this, that there will actually be a sort of like a huge shift in that the in-person meeting won't be as necessary? Or do you think it'll always be necessary? Do you think it's always best to meet in person?
I think it's lovely when it's possible and simple, but I don't know that meeting in person for meeting in person's sake is a worthy enough cause to always meet in person. Depends on what you're discussing and what you're working through. And I think it's very valuable if you're working with someone online for a long period of time to eventually have that in-person meeting, because there's a lot of joy between the people when you've been working together very closely. So just it bolsters what you've got. I don't think it's necessary to win and keep business though. We have a customer, I think we gained in 2003 that I just met in 2018. And that was really interesting. It was a room full of men in a factory, and I'd talk with 4 or 5 of them on the phone over various points in time in the year, and everybody looks a little different than you expect, but all told, it was an hour of our lives, and yet it was worth collectively, I imagine, a whole lot more than an hour of life. So there is a lot of value to certain in-person meetings, but I'm hopeful we reevaluate travel for travel's sake, even though I love to travel.
No, I understand. Well, it's funny because my boss, he likes to travel. I mean, he's okay with it, but I think that a lot of times we feel this obligation to always meet in person. And that's a drain on resources, it's a drain on our time, and there might be some of these sort of these shifts in our mentality, just because after all of this settles down, we're going to readjust our values in a sense.
I think you're also going to see much more flexibility and trust within companies to allow their people to work from home at least part of the time. As a full-time person working from home, my favorite mix over the years when I had flexibility to do either is about 2 days in the office and 3 at home. I think that really maximizes productivity with a team. And so I'm interested to see if that will shift, if other people will embrace that.
And that was part 1 with my conversation with Heather Noggle. We're talking about what it's like to work from home and how people are adjusting to the new normal. Our next podcast will be part 2. We're going to follow up on this topic, and we hope you stick around. Subscribe to our podcast. We've got a lot of exciting things happening in the next few months. We're all in this together. Thanks for listening. We'll be back soon.